Hey, Freight Pod listeners. Before we get started today, let's do a quick shout out to our sponsor, Rapido Solutions Group. Rapido connects logistics and supply chain organizations in North America with the best nearshore talent to scale efficiently and deliver superior customer service. Rapido works with businesses from all sides of the logistics industry. This includes brokers, carriers, and logistics software companies. Rapido builds out teams with roles across customer and carrier sales and support, back office administration, and technology services. The team at Rapido knows logistics and people. It's what sets them apart. Rapido is driven by an inside knowledge of how to recruit, hire, and train within the industry, and a passion to build better solutions for success. The team is led by CEO Danny Frisco and COO Roberto Acaza, two guys I've worked with from my earliest days in the industry at Coyote. I have a long history with them and I trust them. I've even been a customer of theirs at Molo, and let me tell you, they made our business better. In the current market where everyone's trying to do more with less and save money, solutions like Rapido are a great place to start. To learn more, check them out at gorapido.com. That's gorapido.com. Thanks for being a sponsor. And before we get this show on the road, we have one more promotion for our old friend Paul Estrada, who's now launching his own podcast, Let's Ride. Let's give him a second to show you what he's all about.
What's up, Freight Pod listeners? Long time no talk. It's your good old friend Paul Estrada here to tell you about my new podcast, Let's Ride with Paul Estrada, the podcast where a dad tackles the big questions of life, career, and everything in between by talking to interesting people that have the answers. Our guests include a 5 million mile long haul truck driver, 1993 Rookie of the Year and World Series champion, a school custodian, a 30-year veteran with the LA County Sheriff's Department, and many more. Join me each week as my 6.5-year-old son Adrian throws out a thought-provoking question or idea, and I invite a guest to help me sufficiently respond to them. From learning about money and investing to finding a passion in life and exploring careers that can be meaningful for you, we cover it all with a dose of humor and some sound bites of wisdom. The Let's Ride podcast with Paul Estrada, available wherever you get your podcasts. So let's ride.
All right, welcome back to another episode of the Freight Pod. I'm your host, Andrew Silver, and I've got a wonderful guest today for our audience. We're getting into a whole different side of the business that we have not touched on, and we've got an expert here to educate us, inform us on how the world of factoring works. And her name is Miss Grace Maher. Did I get the last name right, Maher?
It's Maher, but everyone says Maher, so it's fine. It's fine.
Shame on ChatGPT. I knew DeepSeek was better. I said, how do I pronounce Grace Maher?
That's right.
And it gave me MAY capitalized -ER, which to me is saying Mayer.
I get it a lot. But, there's Bill Maher, and so I'm thinking, maybe he's not as well known as... But and my mom growing up would always say it's like the planet Mars without an S. I was like...
That works.
Yeah.
If she's got to get that into the ChatGPT training, so they know that now, and next time, there won't be a next time for me, but next time someone else wants to get your name right, hopefully ChatGPT is better prepared.
Well, it's Irish. I think it's really Maher. So are any of us saying it right?
It's the world you make it. It's
right.
Your name. You get to be what you want.
That's right.
Grace Maher, the wonderful Grace Maher,
Thank you.
COO of OTR Solutions, one of the top factoring companies in the industry. We're coming full circle. For those of you who've been listening since episode 1, our boy Kevin Nolan talked about OTR a little bit. It's one of the businesses that he helped get started and is involved with. And so let's start with your own journey, Grace, into the space. Take me back even before you got into freight. What were you doing coming out? You're smart. Went to Georgia Tech. Is that right?
I did. I grew up in Atlanta, so I've never left. Kind of wish I had looking back, but I grew up in Atlanta, and so my parents are from New York. My dad's from the Bronx, and my mom's from Long Island. And he moved down here in the 70s to become a sportscaster. And he recognized Atlanta was a strong sports city, but had no sports news. So he came down and fell in love with, I think, Bobby Cremins at Georgia Tech and their basketball, program. And all I can remember from being a little girl was going to the basketball games, and he would always say, "You're going to go to Georgia Tech." And so when it came time to apply for colleges, I'll never forget the application for NYU came in, and he threw it in the trash and said, "We've already had this conversation." Only school I applied to, thank goodness. I mean, I had good grades. I was going to get in. I was a female in 2000 trying to get into Georgia Tech. I was definitely getting in. So, there's one girl for every 12 guys at Tech. People always ask me that stat. But
why is that?
It's a very well, traditionally it was a boys' school, but I don't know, engineering, architecture. It was, not a lot of women.
Historically male dominated.
Historically male dominated. I should probably know the history a little bit better. I just remember calling my dad the very first time I went through the student center, because all my friends had gone to University of Georgia or Alabama or Auburn. They're having these amazing, college experiences. And I called my dad. I said, "Dad, it's Friday at the student center and they're all playing chess." And he's like, "That's good for you, baby. Go figure it out,
That's awesome.
So
did you play chess?
No, I did. No, I didn't play chess. I would go to Auburn a lot on the weekends.
I was going to say, you went to another school to find a good time.
I actually worked a ton through college. I worked like 30, 40 hours through college.
Doing what?
I worked for a small boutique selling high-end shoes and purses called Personality and Soul. Yes.
Okay.
Personality and Soul. Did you got it?
That'll draw you in, I guess, maybe.
And then I went and worked at Nordstrom, which has amazing service. And so between working for a family-owned boutique that, you had to give great service, because like they could go to the large department stores in Atlanta. So why would you go there? So the owners of that business were very big on service and bringing people back. And then of course, Nordstrom, which is an incredible company to work for. I learned a lot about service and, so I went to tech and worked in retail.
Not the expected route, but I hired two people, I think, who either I think they did come from Nordstrom, and Molo, we hired two people who come from Nordstrom. And when you're running a business, you're always kind of paying a little bit of attention to where are these people coming from? It's just an interesting anecdote to be mindful of, I get a lot of people who went to this school or this major, or they've been bartender. And in freight, you hear a lot about athletes and bartenders and servers, waiters, waitresses, and how they do well because, it's very service oriented. You're dealing with problems, people complaining to you a lot. Or team-like environments with sports. In any case, I had never thought about people from a Nordstrom type background, but both of the individuals we hired from there were incredible, and they knew how to cater to the customer in ways that just kept the customer happy. Does that resonate?
Completely. I mean, Nordstrom every morning would pull all of the employees together and have a stand-up every morning. And they would do it in pep rally format where there would be music blaring and this is a retailer, right? But if you think back, or at least I do, to those days, the shoe salesman, which, Nordstrom started in Seattle as a shoe company. They were not originally a very large department store. So they started as a shoe company, family-owned business, and they really carried so much of the mission and values of that family through and through all those years into Nordstrom becoming, a mega retailer of high-end, brands. And the biggest thing that they would teach us in the morning was just like, that everyone has a choice of where they're going to shop. So why are they going to pick Nordstrom? And we walk around the counter with the bag, and they gave me business cards. I mean, I'm an 18-year-old selling fashion jewelry, but they treated me like, you're an executive of Nordstrom, here are your cards, and you hand them out and you get to know people's names. I mean, I loved it. And there was an aspect of commission where, of course, the more that I sell, the better that I do. And when you looked over at the shoe salesmen, those men and women that sold shoes made $200,000 a year selling. Yes, they did so well. I don't think people realize, like, if you sold shoes at Nordstrom,
Certainly not.
They did phenomenal. It was I mean, it's a great company. They take care of their people. You had employee stock options, and even if you worked there for a little amount of time, and they promoted people from within, and they acknowledged people. It really taught me a lot about being at what felt like a very big company, but being acknowledged and being told like how to, acknowledge others, and the way that the store manager would walk through. I mean, I haven't seen a lot of, companies operate in such a way. And Nordstrom was an incredible experience. I graduated from tech actually with a business degree and a certificate in accounting, because my father said everyone always needs an accountant. So you'll go, because I was like, I don't want to be an engineer. And he said, well, go do numbers. And so when I graduated from tech, Nordstrom offered me a position in their HR department to help recruit for all of their new stores. So I helped open the store in San Antonio, and the one at Phipps here in Atlanta. And then my father says, you cannot work retail. I did not send you to Georgia Tech to work retail. And he says, go, Dad, good Lord. So I went and became an auditor for 5.5 years for a company that did specialize in low income housing, tax credits, solar credits. And I did that for 5.5 years. And then I got into freight.
So first thought I have, your dad kind of, the limited, 8 minutes I've been listening to you talk, and a few notes to your dad, he kind of reminds me a little bit of my own father, and like this. Sounds like he was simple and direct, and yet always pointing you generally in the right direction.
So my father is, okay, there's not enough. The podcast could be about him. He's incredible. He's a charismatic, crazy, totally eclectic. I don't know how he is a man of 9 lives. He is pretty incredible. He's crazy. He started the first rugby league in Atlanta. He started the first, sports radio broadcasting station in Atlanta. Got fired, so he started another one because he's from the Bronx, and so he would say things he wasn't supposed to say, and
it only works on Howard Stern back then.
Exactly. And the stories, from his first car was a fire engine, and his, the stories of rugby parties, and, Studio 54. I've got a lot of great stories about my dad. He's pretty awesome. But
let me ask you this before we get into freight. Let's stay on your dad for a minute. And we don't have time for all the stories, but why don't you tell me the best parts of him that you feel you've pulled into yourself, or that you've learned from him that you've applied into your life today, and how you are as a professional, as a, personally. I'm just, what are the best parts of him that you try to carry with you in your life?
Oh, what a great question. His work ethic, every night before the first day of school, he would make me sign a contract that school was my job and I would do a great job. A little bit of his, his sarcasm. He's real sarcastic, so I can be I'm not. I most of the time I'm funny when I'm not trying to be, but he's hilarious. Um, and probably his love of people. He's incredibly loyal. I am very loyal, just like he is, almost to a fault. But he loves his people. Oh my goodness, and he's a giant teddy bear. So I definitely got my love of people and affection and drive to do, to work really hard from him. But
There's an ode to Dad.
yeah,
So
there's an
clearly
ode to
you got
Dad.
a lot of the good from him.
Yeah.
All right, so 5.5 years of mind-numbing work as an auditor, and then you get pulled into freight. Sorry, I added mind-numbing. Maybe you thought it was thrilling. I shouldn't have said that, but
Well, what's funny is it was mind numbing. And have you ever done a job where you're like, I know I'm not really good at this? And it feels bad. Like at least to me, I don't ever really want to do anything that I don't feel great at, which
yeah.
that's ego. Yay for ego. I was the captain of the soccer team, and I like leading. I like feeling like I'm doing well.
Nothing wrong with that.
I didn't feel like I did well in accounting. At a certain point, it's like, I don't really know if I care about GAAP principles. Like, that's just not really doing it for me. So, and then I started to realize that they were sending me to a lot of conferences and I was going to a lot of meetings. And I'm like, well, I'm really great at sales. Like, I'm great at the people part. Like, you want me to sell our auditing, and that would have been fine too. And I probably could have done that. But instead, I called my cousin Bobby. Bobby went to high school with Kevin. They played football together. They were very close.
Kevin Nolan, right?
That's correct. Yep. Kevin Nolan. Back then, everybody started by knowing Kevin Nolan, right? Like So, but I called Bobby and I said, I don't think I can do this anymore. And so if you hear of anything, let me know. And Bobby was working at NTG. Bobby had been in the Army and, we were a really close family. So oftentimes on Sundays, we would have family dinner. And when Bobby would come home from deployments, he would say, when I get out of the Army, Kevin's going to give me a job. And I was at the auditing firm at this time. And I was like, oh, what are you going to do with Kevin? Because I knew Kevin. I was like, what are you doing with Kevin? He's like, well, he loads trucks that are empty. I was like, that's a job? And he's like, yeah, it's a great job. He's doing great. So anyway, fast forward to when I called Bobby. I said, I think I need something new. Like, if you hear anything, let me know. And he's like, well, Kevin might be hiring. Like, you should come talk to Kevin. I said, okay. So, I got my little interview outfit on and I show up to sit down with Kevin. And after about probably an hour and a half of sitting with Kevin, I said yes to a job. I went from making $85,000 a year in 2000. Well, I forget how old I was, but it was around 2011 that I left the auditing firm and took, gosh, I can say this, right? I took like $33,000 to take an opportunity with Kevin because that's how good of a salesman he is. And he was so passionate. And I was like, I believe in the dream that he has and I want to be a part of it. And at the time, I think I was employee 20, maybe 20. I was one of the first full-time females he hired, and I was going to do HR, recruiting, and accounting for 40 hours a week because none of those were a 40-hour-a-week job. Okay. And so that's where I started. But right around the time that I started, Kevin had founded OTR. And I started to see as they were looking at paperwork and trying to figure out, like, should we buy this? Shouldn't we buy this? I'm like, pass that over here. What are you looking at? And I start matching the PODs with the rate cons and, and asking, what are we doing here? And I'm like, this is so up my alley. Like, we need to figure out if we're going to buy this. And you want me to be nice to a carrier on the other end of the phone? Like, all day. I will do this all day. And that's how it all started. And I would come in the morning and we would invoice in the morning. I would collect in the afternoon and I would sell before I went home and pass the leads to Chris Ebel and he would close them. You know, Chris.
Yep.
And there were 5 of us on fold up desks and folding chairs and, you know, big pens because that was the nicest office supply we could own. You know, and we joke, I would like, if the printer was out of ink, I'd scream, shake the toner because there was always a little more left, you know? I mean, we had nothing. Like, Blake would yell if we used a Post-it note. Like, why would you use a piece of paper you could throw away, you know? But those were some of the best days, you know? It was so fun.
So I want to first go to Kevin for a minute. Just that the idea that you spent an hour and a half with him and he sold you on the job right then and there. It strikes me because this weekend I recorded an episode with my father. I spent 4 hours talking to him, and we talked about sales at one point, and I asked him what makes him a great kind of, how is he able to captivate people the way that he does? Mm-hmm. And he hit passion. And it's like so true. I've felt like the leaders who are best at just locking people and like captivating them in a way that makes them just so endeared to whatever the person's saying. It is more often than not passion that is a driving factor behind that. So like, I just am curious, like, will you take me back to, I mean, I assume Kevin was like 25, 26. I mean, he was young at the time. Mm-hmm. What was that experience like sitting there on the other side of the table with him, you know, someone who becomes like, you know, a very important figure in our industry with the businesses he's helped build and create. What are the other elements that were so kind of unique about Kevin in that moment that you just were like, I want to do this with this person?
He was honest, you know, he was honest about what he was building. He was honest about what he could give, and he was honest about what he would expect. And all of those things were like, it was going to be a challenge. It was going to be hard work. He couldn't pay me a ton now. But if I contributed to the business and I was, you know, and he made me feel like he had a vision and the right people that were willing to like be a part of it and give what he could give. Like, I understood that this was like, he needed me as much as I needed him. And if we did it together, then we would be succeeding. But he also said it in such a way that I was like, he has no plans not to succeed, you know? And it wasn't like a cockiness, but it was like, I'm doing this and, you know, I'd love for you to be a part of the ride. Like, and I need you, but I can't pay you yet. So if you want to take, you know, almost like if I was willing to gamble on myself, right? And I was at that point.
And, you know, you mentioned how before when you talked to your cousin, he's like, he's loading trucks. And you obviously had never understood that could be a business. Then you're in your first week or whatever, and you're sitting there doing the job, and you start to learn about the potential factoring concept here. Was that completely foreign to you too? As you were looking at that, were you like, what, is this a real business? Like, how did you wrap your mind around the opportunity that you were kind of walking into, given that it was so foreign and just, I don't know, almost unreal?
It was so foreign. I mean, nobody taught me about factoring. That was not like, but as I understood it and asked questions and, you know, there were 70% of carriers factor. And like, I also had the experience of working at the freight brokerage, you know, in the beginning of OTR, that wasn't a 40-hour-a-week job either. So I honestly got to do both for almost a year before Fritz and Kevin were like, you have to pick a path. I also married a freight broker, so I knew a lot about that side of it too. But I learned a ton. But you know, in the beginning, it's like I did see the checks going out to carriers was this big, and the checks going out to factoring companies was this big. So obviously, like, factoring companies were established, but yeah, this concept of like the carriers use a factoring company to get paid quickly. I mean, it was all a little wild, wild west back then, but I took it for face value and was like, oh, okay. Like, I understood the idea of doing it better. And my favorite class at Tech had been this entrepreneurship forum class. In fact, Sarah Blakely came and spoke to us literally like a month after she had been on Oprah. So right as like the trajectory of Spanx was taking off. And so I had always had this idea that like I knew I wanted to be a part of something, right? So I don't know. It's just like it was new, but it was exciting. Like carriers are doing this. Let's just do it better. And I kind of felt like I could do the service thing better than anyone in the building. Maybe it was because I was a woman. Maybe it was because of my background. Like maybe it's because I got to talk to carriers all day and like that just seemed super easy. And the way the freight brokers were talking to them, I was like, oh, I can be very nice.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit. So again, this is the first time we've talked about factoring on this show. So I think it's our job to kind of educate the audience on as much of it as we can. And I'm going to be relying on you for that. Let's start with just kind of because I think also we want to highlight the entirety of the OTR story and the growth and how you guys have become such a mainstay in the space. So like, give me an idea in your mind of what the landscape was in 2011 when you started. So OTR was just, you were one of the first employees. The business was just getting going. What did the competitive landscape look like back then? Give me a little bit of that background.
There's still, I mean, there's more factors today than there were back then, but there was only a handful, I mean, more than a handful, but probably no more than, I don't know, 15, 20 major factors, probably less. And they were charging anywhere between maybe 7 and even 12%. So let me back up. Factoring, for those who do not know.
Thank you.
Yeah. Factoring, for those who do not know, which by the way, thanks for inviting me on to explain this. So
you're the face of factoring.
I love that. Thank you. So essentially the carriers, most people don't realize I guess, and your audience does realize that, there are tons of owner operators out there, independent trucking companies running the freight all over America. It's not just, the Lansars and the Covenants and the, Schneiders. There's tons of independent trucking companies. And these men and women, they are great at moving freight. They're not necessarily great at billing it. They're also agnostic most of the time to the brokers they're working with. They'll take anyone's freight. They'll take the best paying freight and anyone that can keep them moving, right? You know this. And again, they don't necessarily always know the pay terms or where they're sending those bills, because once they deliver, that POD is gold. Once you have a signed POD, you get to get paid. And essentially, carriers use a factoring company. They submit the POD, and then we pay them at a small discount that day or the next day. And we go bill the broker or the shipper and wait on the payment. And probably anywhere between, like I said, 60 and 70% of carriers factor. The thing about factoring is you can't, just like they can pick and choose brokers, they can't pick and choose factors. So once they sign up with a factoring company, they're locked in until either the contract's up and they say, hey, I want out, or another factoring comes in and buys the aging and gets them out of the factoring contract. So at that time, in 2011, contracts were pretty loose, factors were charging 7 to 12%, insane, for 3-day pay, maybe. And we came into the market at 5% saying we'll pay you the next day. And people thought we were crazy. 5% for next day payment. And we took off, as much as 4 people and a phone can take off, right? But, we from the get-go were answering people's calls, which if you called any factoring company at that time, good luck getting anyone on the phone. Carriers, once you signed up and you had to send everything, you got paid if you got paid. If they had to charge something back, they would just charge it back willy-nilly, which is really hard for a carrier. In other words, for anyone who doesn't know what factoring is, once I pay the carrier the $1,000, if the broker short pays the load at all, I go back to the carrier and say, you have to pay me back, right? Well, a lot of times factoring companies, if they don't do their due diligence, if they don't verify correctly, and they just pay blindly, then they're going to be charging things back to the carrier a lot. That can put a carrier out of business. So that was also what we were trying to do really well from the beginning, is like, when we pay you, we're going to pay you right every time. So you don't have to deal with chargebacks. So you don't have to deal with issues. And we were also one of the first non-recourse factoring companies, truly non-recourse, meaning once we buy the bill, if the broker goes out of business, it's on us. We took on the risk. So there wasn't a ton of credit, out there for carriers to know, like, should I work with this broker? Shouldn't I work with this broker? Carriers would take freight all the time and then not get paid. Or if the factoring company did pay them and now the factoring company can't get paid back, they're charging that load back completely. So there are a few different angles in which I feel like we came out of the gate immediately and had some momentum behind us. And part of that was the fact that we were competing on rate. We absolutely were competing on service. And we were also competing on, I would say, the fact that they can depend on our payment as being one that they could trust not to be charged back later, and put them at risk of having cash flow issues or going out of business, because $1,000 invoice like that, they're out, small carrier. So,
yeah. So I'm curious, one, like, how easy was it to just say, we can make money at 5%, let's charge 5%, and here we go?
I mean, not easy. We were very picky about who we could work with in the beginning, in fact, now, nowadays it's funny. It's like, I was just having this conversation the other day, because you get to a certain size where you can sort of work with most anyone, right? And take a risk. But back then you couldn't spend time hoping you were signing on a carrier that we weren't going to make money on. In fact, one of the first lessons we learned was car haulers. I remember, I think it was Chris Tiger, we call him Tiger. We thought we found like a honey hole with car haulers, because all of a sudden you started calling car haulers and they're like, you'll factor for me? Oh yeah, of course we will. And I think it was like after a few weeks, I was like, we can't do this. Like, we can't make any money on this. This takes way too long verifying these, this is not supporting paperwork that they're turning in. So really understanding who we could afford to work with and make money, because we couldn't hire either until we could justify hiring another body.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah.
That's so funny. That reminds me so much of the kind of notion of in freight brokerage sales. Like, if a customer gives you loads on the first call you make to them, it's probably not going to be a good customer for you. And if they're that easy to give you a chance, they're giving everybody a chance. And so it's probably going to be the cheapest freight, or in this case, the most complex company to work with, which is why they were ecstatic at you offering them the chance to factor. They're like, you'll do this? Okay, yeah, sure. Here you go. Good luck with this paperwork.
That's right. If it's too good to be true, it probably is.
Yeah. When did the industry, now the rates are like way lower than, 7 to 12. I was surprised to hear that. Now, where's the market at? Like 2 to 3 generally?
A lot of 2 to 3 would be probably fair. A lot of factors will even say, under 2%. I'll argue it's not their effective factoring rate once you add in the chargebacks, or then you look at the contract and see that there's tiered rate based on aging. So once the invoice ages to 40, 50 days, they'll plug in a fee, for it taking longer. So, I think it was last year or the year before we started saying, like, look, we'll look at contracts for free. Like, you don't even have to work with OTR, because once you start to really look into different factoring contracts, you really can pick apart what those, what they're really charging. But sometimes you'll even see sub 1%, but those are, for larger larger trucking companies.
Yeah, it makes sense, with scale. The bigger the company, the lower the rate they should get. I understand that piece. What I'm curious about, I guess, and I feel like you kind of just validated it, but my thought is, as the market has gotten more competitive and more factors are coming into the competitive landscape, there's been a fight for every dollar and rates have dropped. And now, like we've seen in freight, as it gets too crowded, people start to get a little shifty and creative in a maybe not so healthy way to make their pricing look more attractive than it is. It kind of sounds like what you're suggesting some companies in the field have done.
Yeah, definitely. I think the most important thing anybody can do is really understand, obviously, their contract, which sounds simple. But when you break things apart, it's like, is it as simple as it sounds when you just see on the screen, like 1%? Like if I call any trucking company today, I'm like, hey, are you interested in factoring? The first thing they ask is what rate do you charge? It's so price sensitive. But then that also, to me, is an indicator of like how long someone has been in trucking, because carriers who've been in trucking for a long time and have ever worked with a factor know that it's more than just the rate. Like OTR has never been the cheapest factoring company in industry. Quite frankly, we're not trying to be. Like that's not the space we play in. We charge, I think, exactly what we need to charge to service an account to keep the carrier successful and to cover our cost of doing business and being a partner. We will certainly, now that we offer different things, we will bundle things. If you're using our fuel card, we can go lower. If you're using our banking solution, we can go lower. Obviously, you keep a lot of things in-house and it makes sense. Like we can go lower. But, years ago, we had someone joke like Gucci didn't go on sale. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. And, we are a Nordstrom, we are a boutique, we are Chick-fil-A, we are when you come to us, you will get someone on the phone and we will support you. And I promise you, you will succeed if you're working with OTR. We're not just about buying an invoice and charging it back. And, it's so much more than that now. Honestly, like when the market took off after COVID, there were people in the market trying to say, we'll factor for free. They're no longer factoring at all. So, it's like, and that's fine, competition's healthy, but, I think we've stayed tried and true to what we've been doing since day one. And that's continuing to evolve. And, in the beginning, we said we're more than just a factoring company. Today, we truly are, a platform of, smart technology that helps carriers. And we happen to, yes, buy bills, but we also, do so much more. And at the end of the day, we truly are trying to show that, like, if you work with OTR, you stay in business longer. That's like the mission critical, like, hey, you work with OTR, you will succeed. So,
I have such a thank you for explaining all that. I have such a high level of appreciation for someone who can say about their business, like in a business that, as you said, the first question for every prospect is, what's your rate? So it's clear there's such a central focus on the factoring rate. And for you to kind of have the confidence to be able to say, hey, we are not the cheapest and we're not trying to be. Mm-hmm. Like you have to be really, really confident in the business behind you and how you can service your customers outside of price to say something like that and for it to hold water. So It's funny to me too, because when my partner Vogrich and I got canned 2 years ago, and we were just thinking of what else we could do. He wanted to start a factoring business, and he's like, we should get into factoring. It's similar to brokerage. It's super fragmented. There's like thousands of little guys, and then there's a few big good ones. But there's room for someone to maybe come in and disrupt. And I kept being like, dude, it's all just a rate. And it's like, it sounds so boring. Like, what am I? It's all, every call is going to be like, what's your factoring rate? And I got nothing else to sell. And clearly I didn't understand kind of all the nuance behind it. But I want to get into a little bit of that, because as I put thought into it, I just kept thinking, all right, well, we have to be able to offer other things besides a rate if we're going to do that. And this, we're not going to do it, to be clear. So there's nothing you could share that would whatever. But I'm curious how over the years, from where you were in 2011 to now where you sit as the COO, and the business is one of the top in the industry, what have you all built into the package that is OTR to make it more attractive than just a rate?
Yeah. Well, and it was funny. I was talking to Clayton this morning, and I was like, so what all, how much should I say? Because, but we share an office, which, I love so much. I don't know how many, executives share offices, but we do at OTR. And it's pretty awesome, because you stay super connected and tight, and like the conversations he's having, the conversations I'm having, and Fritz and Blake, like it's great. And anyway, we were joking, and I was like, don't worry, I never give away the secret sauce, but no, look, we continue to create solutions based on what our carriers are asking for. And two of them, all of our solutions are on our website. So none of that is secret, certainly. Fuel, they need fuel. We obviously have our partnership with MIG, which helps with insurance. Our banking solution with Clutch. So we're already paying them. Why do we not make sure we're paying them, where they're at, which is on their phone? And, the Clutch mobile banking app allows us to pay directly to that bank account, and then they can use it right away. And our mobile app, we were one of the first factoring companies in 2012 to have a mobile app. We were one of the first factoring companies to ever pay off of a copy of a POD. People thought we were crazy.
Why is that? So why would paying off a copy of a POD be a problem?
Well, you remember back in the day, the trip packs, right?
Trip
Remember
packs?
the kiosks at the truck stops? Trip pack, they would put all their originals in the trip pack, and then they would be overnighted. It is.
I don't remember that.
Oh wow, how much? Am I way older than you? That's so funny.
I'm 34, so
okay.
you do your own math there.
Yeah,
I know not to ask.
Okay, a little bit, yeah. So the originals, factoring companies will only pay off originals, because we had to bill the broker, and so many brokers would at that point only pay off of originals. Why? Because the longer it takes to get the original, the more time you have to pay the carrier, right? So it was a whole, so here we are saying, we'll pay you off the copy, and then when we get the originals, we'll go bill the broker. And the carriers are ecstatic. You mean to tell me I can send you a copy, you'll go ahead and pay it, then you'll get the originals? And so that was like revolutionary. So, and again, just even getting someone on the phone, look, it sounds so silly, but money is personal. And when you need to get paid, like you need to get someone on the phone. So, when we think about like what we're doing now today for the carrier, for the broker, with ePay and now our broker payments, like we've come full circle. And, we want the brokers to realize that if you are loading an OTR carrier, like you're essentially working with OTR. So now we have brokers that are like, hey, they're phenomenal. And we have carriers that are like, hey, they're phenomenal. And we create a network where everybody goes, like, working with OTR is fantastic. And I use their fuel and I use their banking, if they're using DAT and they take a load, it immediately shows up in their client portal or on their mobile app. So now when they deliver the load, they can just upload the paperwork, trying to make everything super seamless to where eventually they just drop paperwork. Nothing is entered. We handle it all. I mean, we continue to think about how we can evolve as a business. And so, yes, it's so much more than factoring. And it's like, what more do you want? TMS integrations,
Yeah.
Fuel advances, of course, on top of, but 24/7 payments and just continuing to think about like, how are we doing it and how do we do it better?
Yeah, no, 100%. I mean, it's such there's clearly so much customer centricity in how you and your team think about the business. And it's one of the things I always respected how Kevin had gotten his kind of tentacles touching every part of the industry. And I guess never realized how beneficial it can be for a business like factoring to have these ancillary businesses that can be coupled together, bundled together to create better offerings. Because I'm just trying to put myself into the shoes of a truck driver or owner operator, and I could see how my first question when you call would be about the factoring rate. But I could see how a good salesperson would help me by the end of the call realize that with just this one person, I can solve 7 of my problems versus just what percentage I'm getting discounted or I'm being discounted off my freight rate. And that's cool. I mean, it's a cool evolution of the business. I'm curious if you could maybe try to touch on, I want to get into your own personal kind of rise from, being the fourth or one of the first few hires to now being the COO. But before we go there, I'm just curious, in the seat you're in now, what is the experience or process like for you and the leadership team as you contemplate new solutions, as you contemplate new ways to cater to the customer? You've clearly added over the years a number of different pieces, I'm sure bit by bit. I'm just curious, like, what that thought process looks like from, hey, carriers are complaining about not having the right kind of bank account, to let's put clutch out to the universe.
Right. So, what I would say is like, we've never lost touch with the carriers themselves. I, to this day, like, I have so many carriers in my phone because I was one of the first account managers, obviously, like as we came up in the business, like we all sort of took a different piece, and, mine was always very client focused. I love our clients. Like, I love our employees and I love our clients, and the people part is my favorite part. So understanding what they need, what they want, what will help them. And we've never really lost sight of that. Like, in order for you to continue to, like, you get hired at OTR and you continue to develop and move up in the company, that only happens like on the ops side if you understand what our mission is, and that's to continue to help clients, service them well. We constantly are checking like our Google reviews and like how people are feeling and making sure that we're checking in with them. And so I say that to say, like, we would hold focus groups. Back in the day, in the first few years, we would have something called Happy Trucking New Year. It was absolutely free. Our carriers would come in January. I would MC this thing, right?
Yep.
I was so nervous, but we would set up a day of education for the carriers. We'd bring in like the Georgia DOT, Officer Burns, and he would do a whole, like, this is what I'm looking for when I do a roadside inspection. We would bring in insurance, like people to talk about, like, when you're getting your renewal, what are they looking at? We would talk about load board, we would talk about, factoring, just like Q&A, like, what are you struggling with? Like, what do you need more of? And it was in sessions like that we would get, our next idea. And then we would all sit in a room and talk about it. And one of the things I love most about, the team that I work with at OTR is that we're very collaborative and nobody holds back. In other words, like, that's a good thing, because nobody's just like co-signing on like, I have an idea. Okay, we'll just do that. It's like, well, why would we do that? Well, if we're going to do that, we should really be doing that. Right. And, and when we all get in the room and we do that, it's awesome. Like nobody builds or does anything in a vacuum that we're not all sort of picking apart and then calling a carrier and saying like, what do you think?
How do you think that kind of culture developed?
You've heard Kevin say this, and, we also hired people that loved to play team sports, or were really driven. I think this beautiful thing about OTR is like, it really is a bunch of like very competitive, yet really solid, good humans, like that came together, and that team. Like, I joke that the early, OTR team is like the 90s Chicago Bulls. Fritz is Phil Jackson, like, and he let all of us be.
Are you
like,
MJ?
No, I'm Scottie Pippen.
Okay.
Yeah. And everybody needs a Scottie, but like, I'm always like, I'm Scottie, and we would joke in the early years, I'd say, I don't need to be Michael Jordan. Like, I'll be Scottie. Somebody else can be Michael, but and it wasn't until The Last Dance came out, the documentary, that people like understood. I was like, did none of you know? Like, because we hire so young. I'm like, did none of you know about Michael and Scottie and this whole thing? And I don't think they did really. But I used to post pictures around the office of Michael and Scottie. Like, be Michael or be Scottie. Just be one of them, And we had our Dennis Rodman and our Steve Kerr, and everybody played their role. And it was really, really fun. And we, Fritz always said, like, it's the most fun when we win together and we celebrate together. And, we were really young. So we came up together too. Like, we were just together a lot, we've grown up together. We got married together. We've had kids, divorces, like, life, we're lifing together. So, at this point, there's just an immense amount of trust and the way we show up for each other and work really, really hard. Like, I used to joke OTR was my first baby because my sister would say, like, you're not saving lives, right? Like, you're not delivering babies. And I was like, of course I'm not a doctor, but like, what I do matters to me. I like really care about the carriers. I really care about, I think what we do is important. It's like, freight is the backbone of America. So it's important.
I love that so much. I mean, it just puts me right back into my own just mindset of, yeah, we're not like saving lives. However, it feels really important to do the work we do when you're as passionate about it as you are, clearly, and you're with a team of people who will liken themselves to the Chicago Bulls of the 90s. It's like, that's a group of people who are so committed to something. Like, they have this vision for what they want to be, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to become that thing and to achieve that thing. And when you see yourselves having that success over multiple years and years, a decade plus for your team, it's like the trust gets to an unprecedented level. The confidence gets to a pretty dang high level. And like the importance feels like it gets to such a high level because there are so many people like intertwined, counting on one another. I mean, how big is the OTR team today?
At our highest, we were pushing 400. We are, less than that now. But we've certainly grown. It's been fun, and not without its trials and tribulations. We've all gone through stuff, and we don't co-sign each other's BS, and but that's what makes it awesome, right? It's like, and this freight cycle as is so like this, like the highs are high and the lows are low. So there's good years, there's tough years, yet it's been amazing. Like, we've had people that started with us as an intern, Drew now as our general counsel, like went to college, passed the bar, like, people that have literally worked so hard and not just said like, I'm going to go work at OTR, but like I'm a career OTR person, like I'm going to drink the Kool-Aid and that's not a bad thing. And I'm like, it's not a bad thing. I don't get these people that don't love their job. Like, go find something you do. Like, there's tons of, opportunity out there. Like, I don't know why anybody would spend their time not doing something that they don't feel good and passionate about. But
I used to say the same thing to my team is, this job isn't for everyone. And you don't even have to be in love with the idea of moving trucks, but you can love the process of working on a team with really good people who are working on that team with you, trying to accomplish something. And it isn't for everyone. And, you got to spend, I understand there's a little bit of a touch grass concept to what I'm about to say, but it's like, you're going to spend 8-9 hours a day, every day working. And that's like likely half or a little bit more than your waking hours in a day. Why wouldn't you do whatever possible to find something you enjoy, at least a little bit, right? I mean, It's like you only get one shot at this life. And I understand you got to pay bills and not everyone has 100 job offers that they can pick from. But if you really don't enjoy your job, you got to do whatever you can to find a job that you will enjoy. I mean, it's just that thing that has always been really apparent to me.
I completely agree. I mean, in all of our first interviews when we were hiring, it was like we needed to make sure we hired the right people because we really, honestly, by the time we could like bring someone on, we desperately needed them, but we needed it to be the right person too. But I used to say to people, like, you spend more time here than you do with your own family. Like you should enjoy it. If there's anything you should ever be selfish about, it's your career, like figure out what you want to do. But in other words, like, don't come here unless you think this is like what you want to do and what you could be passionate about. Cause we're all in this together. And luckily that I would say our first, even 50 employees, like it was magical. Like it was not that it isn't today. Like it's just different. When you get bigger, people feel like, do they notice me? And it's like, yes, of course. Like, but every generation, if you will, like, of hiring class that comes in has to be willing to like bring the next one along, right? Like if you're just wanting me to be the glue, like that's never going to be enough. Like I'm always going to say I care and I love all of our employees, but everybody has to be part of the glue and say like I'm in it and I'm, and that's what we're trying to always continue to like bring to the office is, we've done a really great job, like over the years. I think of really making sure that like we don't lose touch of, the OTR, what's special about OTR.
Talk to me about your own kind of rise, because you started as like an account manager doing 2 jobs for 2 companies, or maybe 4 or 5 jobs between the 2 companies, or functions at least. And the company had crazy growth, became a top player in the space, and you rose to now be the COO of the business. So can you just talk to me about what do you think are the qualities or aspects that you displayed that led to that kind of rise? Because I just think these are the coolest stories. I think it's really cool to interview founders who build business, but I think almost more cool is seeing someone who comes in as like the lowest level possible and rises to the top, and like how do they do it is, I think, fascinating.
Thanks.
Don't be modest. Let me preface before you give your answer that she's not going to be modest. She's going to give us the hard truth, and it's not going to sound arrogant or
okay.
Whatever.
Hard truth. Hard truth. I want to be, a part of the success. I genuinely want to like be up there in it. I want a piece of that. Like, and, if somebody's got to lead, why can't it be me? I love being a part of the success. I don't know if it's my father and his, Bronx, like, you say what you mean, but it's like, I've never, from the time I was 13 on, I actually lived with my dad and my uncle. My uncle was in the Marine Corps. My father was this crazy radio host, and I'm comfortable with men. So that part never bothered me. Like being in a very male dominated, when you hear people talk about freight and there's so much, like, I'm like, none of that. I never felt like I wasn't with them. I played basketball with the guys at lunch at the accounting firm, and I worked out with the baseball players and high school. Like I'm comfortable in those settings. And so for me, it was just making sure that, if it was, creating new process or hiring or being a cheerleader for the carriers and what they needed, or, whatnot, like, why couldn't it be me? And I would say as the years went on, more and more responsibility was added, and I welcomed it. If something needed to get done, I'll do it, because I felt, I don't know, I understood we were building something, and it was exciting. And I took on the challenges and sometimes not knowing what to do. But, that's where Fritz comes in, like somebody who guided us, but also allowed for us, if we did fail, to, do it gracefully, no pun intended, and like work through those things, or collaborate enough together to be like, we're not doing it like that, or we are, or I would challenge, sometimes what we were doing. And I think that earned respect. It was like, why are we doing it that way? Like, I don't. And so it just sort of came naturally. And then in 2016, I actually got sober. And I tell you that piece of it because I don't think I'd be where I am today if I hadn't. It's definitely a part of, if I'm not going to be modest, it's like, well, then thank God I, went and got a 12-step program and have, coming up on 8.5 years of sobriety.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I definitely know that if I hadn't made that choice at that stage of my career, I would not be where I am today. 100%. 100%. And, I know what it looks like to continue down that road. I did not know what it looked like not, and to go get help. And I quietly did. And, since then, I would say the team at OTR has known, about my sobriety and is insanely supportive. And it's been amazing because along my journey, I've helped people, on theirs, and, that's been a gift. And so it's just really cool because, I work with people who love to work hard, play hard. And I was one of them too. And I still am, but, it's just different now. Like when I go out, mine doesn't necessarily have alcohol in it, but that's okay. Like I still go out for drinks and still have a great time. But yeah, that was, I don't know if that's not what got me to COO. It's certainly innovation and, partners and execution and hiring the right people. I work with incredible people. And, so, knowing who to work with and who to hire and who to bet on and who to delegate to and who to let run, and, and then they do it, truthfully, it makes my job easier. Right.
100%. So if I heard you well, which I thought I had summarized your answer until you hit me with the sobriety, and then you went into another. So I'm gonna go through what I heard.
Okay.
So advocating for yourself is a key part of this. And you talked about putting yourself out there, wanting to be a part of the success, not being shy or afraid or uncomfortable about the male dominated situation, which also I think is a don't be a victim mentality. If you want to get somewhere, you can't look at the room around you and see it as an obstacle as much as like, I belong here. I'm going to use my voice. You talked a lot of, you didn't say these words, but you alluded to the idea that you were never afraid to use your voice, whether that was volunteering to do whatever it takes to get the job done, which to me is another piece of what helps you rise, is that kind of do whatever it takes mentality, but also to challenge the room and to challenge the status quo and to say, hey, I think we should double check that or think about that twice or whatever, which does garner respect. I mean, I think groupthink is one of the biggest inhibitors of innovation in businesses. And it's so easy to just want to fall in line with everybody around you when the exec team is contemplating a new idea, because it's just easier to do that than to possibly stick out as the person who was wrong.
Right.
So a lot of that I'm picking up from your answer. And then I commend the kind of willingness and vulnerability to speak to the sobriety. And like, I just believe people who have gone through what you've gone through are tremendously resilient people, have had their asses kicked and had to put their ego in check and deal with what feels like embarrassment at first of sharing that with people and feeling like there's something wrong with me. And the reality is there's nothing wrong with you. There's nothing wrong with any of us that have gone through things like that, where we've had to put something down because we just, enjoy it a little bit too much. And the amount of resilience it takes to get up and stand there with confidence and go through the next phase and tackle all of that. It's extremely commendable. I respect the hell out of it. And I think it absolutely, you said that's not why you're this. Well, you said that helped, but it's not why you're the COO, but I would maybe add that it's probably a contributing factor to why you are, because I bet you have a lot of respect from people who appreciate that they know you truly, know you for who you authentically are. And I just commend it.
Thank you. That's so nice. And I do try to lead with vulnerability, just because I don't know. It's like, once you let the toothpaste out of the tube, like you can't get it back in, it's like,
Put it back in.
Yeah. Like this is just like, it's just me. And I am vulnerable. I have to be, I think when you do, I regularly go to meetings, I work with others in recovery. I'm very passionate about it. You end up really discovering like a lot more about yourself, because a lot of times when you were in the thick of it, like you were, in my case, very functional, right? Like I'm working really hard, I'm getting things done. I'm 0 to 90 in a lot of phases, right? Like if I like something, I want more of it. So you're right. Maybe it did have something to do with where I'm at. I remember when I first went and got help, I thought, God, this is the lowest of the low, right? Like, this is how and then I started to walk into rooms and look around, and I was like, I want to go where the successful people are, because it didn't occur to me in the beginning, like successful people actually, like really successful people are actually in recovery too, until I found this one meeting and I was like pulled in. Part of it was that I pulled in, and as silly as it sounds, like I could tell from the cars, like, who are the, it's a Saturday morning. And, I guess if you show up to a meeting on a Saturday morning, you must really want it, recovery. So,
Yep.
But it was an incredible experience. I have met over the years some of the most incredible people that are mentors, not just in recovery, but in the professional world, and how they lead themselves. And it is being authentically yourself, and it is not being afraid. I'm definitely not one of those people that like knows what I like because of the billboard, right? Like I've had to really like, what do I like to do? Because when you first give up what it was that you like to do, I assure you, you don't know yourself at all. You don't know. I used to like patios and pitchers of beer. Like that's, so more than that. But anyway, all that to say, I think it's been a really special several years of watching OTR grow. And I'm grateful I've been a part of it, and it's because of my sobriety that I've been able to certainly be a part of it. So.
Well, vulnerability is the key to connection. And if you lead with vulnerability and you're willing to share things like this with your team, with the world, and a podcast like this, you are inviting people to connect with you. You are offering them something meaningful to you, and not knowing what they'll do with it, not knowing if they'll try to use it against you or judge you, and all those kind of negative thought patterns we have about ourselves when we're going to that place of being vulnerable and talking about things that we've struggled with. But I've done this before with my own struggles. And, I talked to my employee base at one point about some of my darkest challenges I've endured, and like the compassion I was met with. And all of a sudden I had meetings with all these people where they set up and they wanted to tell me about their own challenges. And it's like people want to meet you where you are. And when you show that you're willing to be human and talk about your own issues, it's like it's a freeing feeling for others to be like, wait, I'm not the only one with problems. Like, and the problems can be so different. It could be gambling, it could be drinking, it could be smoking, it could be, video games or shopping. It could be anything that just is an unhealthy practice in your life that's like weighing you down and you're feeling guilt or shame about. But at the end of the day, you come to realize that we're all struggling with something.
That's right.
And the ones who look like they aren't probably are just as much. And the sooner you're willing to talk to people about it, the sooner you can free yourself of all that kind of negativity in your own head that there's something wrong with you, because there's nothing wrong with any of us. We've all just had the circumstances we've dealt with in our life that got us to where we are. But those choices are choices we've made, but they're not choices we have to live with forever. We get to make new choices every day about who we want to be and how we want to be. So, I don't know. I just appreciate you sharing all that.
Thanks. Yeah.
So anyways, where do I want to go from here? Let's talk a little bit about the last 2 years in the space. It's been a really hard few years for everybody. I think for factors too. I'm certainly thinking about brokers and carriers. And what has that been like in the OTR world, or just even in the factoring world in general? I'm not looking for specifics around numbers, but, I assume, as interest rates rose, that makes your business more challenging. Can you talk a little bit about that, like the impact of interest rates to your business, how something like that you can't control, what you can do within the business to navigate those changes? And then I want to talk a little bit about how the industry at large has dealt with the last 2 years and what you guys are seeing.
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because most people don't realize that the interest rates and how they affect our business from the cost of capital, right? And so the past 2 years have been insane as far as, like, I remember when the market took a dive, like the nose dive. What was that? Like late 2022 and 2023.
Late, yeah, it was early 20 at the end of 2022 leading into early 2023.
Yeah. And I remember shortly thereafter, a partner of ours in the space called me and he said, "Are you going to be willing to factor for carriers for free because of what they're going through?" And I was like, "For free? No, for free." Like and then also carriers start calling in like, "I need a lower factoring rate because I'm getting paid significantly less by the broker." And it's like, right, but our interest rate on the cost of capital, like we have to borrow the money that buys the invoice and we're only doing it at a certain place. And then on top of it, now brokers are not paying us in 30, 35 days, right? Now they want 40 or 45 days. And so when you talk about a carrier who needs that money today, probably, when things are great, they can wait a day or two. If, it doesn't matter as much, they might turn all of their invoices in at the end of the week. But when times are tough, they're living load to load. And when they need to get paid, they need to get paid by us that day. And so we've got to get the money out. We're not getting it in. It's costing us double what it costed us, previously to purchase it. And it's like the last thing we want to do is raise our rates when they're struggling. And so, it's funny, the carriers don't realize, like, when they're doing well, we're doing well. When they're not doing well, we're not doing well. And we're not trying to make it harder for them. Like, if anything, even we realized, as an example, when a carrier gets charged back an invoice. Let's say I pay the carrier $1,000 and then come to find out, they were late and the broker's charging them 500. It legitimately was their fault, right? They're like, yes, I was late and I'm taking the deduction. It's like, okay, well, Bob, you got to pay the $500 back. That our non-recourse doesn't cover your inability to service the load the way you said it would. And he says, well, Grace, I can't pay it back right now. Like, I've got my truck note on Friday. I've got my insurance. I also have to pay the driver. There's no way I can give you that $500. Well, Bob, when can you give it to me? Well, I'll give you $100 over the next 5 weeks. And imagine if you have thousands of carriers who want to do that. And you're managing thousands of carriers who want, and then on top of it, they want to pay back the $500 over the 5 weeks at 0%. They're not going to pay you, right? They're not like this. It's a free loan, essentially, isn't it?
Yeah, no, it is for sure.
It's just, these are the things that we're dealing with on a regular basis as a factoring company. And so you think about all those factors who are just trying to win on rate. It's like, if we're struggling, I know you're definitely struggling. And, I feel like we have done a great job to not struggle. And I say that, carefully, because I'm not trying to, brag, but I feel like what we did and have done over the years, first of all, our system is proprietary. So we built all of our own software. And the algorithms and the things, everything that we have at play that allows us to understand if we want to purchase an invoice. And that's been one of my favorite parts, to work with our operations team and the, the business intelligence, Rob and his team, and really understanding, should we or shouldn't we buy this? And how do we use, AI and algorithms, all these things to verify and do it right? Because if we can do it right up front, we don't play that game on the back end of chasing money. And that's costly to everyone. You lose clients that way, and it costs your factoring business a lot of money, the cost of capital and time value and all of that. So, doing it right, assessing fraud is a nightmare. I don't think, no one's shocked by hearing that. It's like, what are we all going to do? Besides come together, share information, work with the other companies that are developing great tools. We've got data. How do we share the data? Like, it's really everybody coming together to combat this at this point, because it's craziness. Like, it's crazy.
Where does it hit the factoring company? Like, what does fraud look like when it's infiltrating your camp? Like, how do you guys get kind of screwed over on fraud?
Yeah, double brokering. Carriers stealing MCs and signing up with OTR under that MC. And then even the most recent one, a carrier, it was a really sophisticated kind of freight or fraud situation where not only did they steal a carrier's identity, but then they planted a broker, an actual agent at a brokerage, and really created, and it wasn't just OTR. It actually was.
They got a real person hired at a real brokerage. Oh, wow. That's, oof. Okay, keep going.
And by the time the brokerage realized, like, wait, we've got to bill our customer for all these. And they go to bill the customer's like, I didn't run any of this. So, it's pretty crazy, the fraud that continues to happen. But what I love is that, like, our team is, we find these things, we immediately, when we're building things, even, we're immediately thinking about, if we build a banking solution, if we build a fuel card, if we create, on our mobile app, pay me now, fuel advance, whatever, what are all the scenarios in which someone will try to create fraud? We will invite everyone in. Let's brainstorm. Let's talk about it. How are we exposing, risk? And at that point, we're trying to get ahead of all of these things. But, it's like, no one's can do it perfectly. And so we learn too. But we try and learn, learn very quickly and hopefully, minimally,
Minimal damage.
minimal damage. That's right. Minimal damage. Hey, that's my job. I gotta, I gotta answer to people if we don't. And so, it's really, really important. And we have a lot of SOPs in place and a lot of things too that our team knows. Like, hey, I say, if you wouldn't buy it with your money, you don't buy it with OTRs. Like always. This is the way we thought about it in the very beginning, and doesn't matter how big we get. Like if that processes and that payment goes out, it's like as if it was your own.
Yeah. What are you all seeing? I mean, you guys have one of the, I think, earliest eyes on potential market shifts because you're seeing all the invoices. What kind of information are you seeing? Everyone's calling the recovery has started, and the recovery. And I'm hopeful that it has, but I don't know that I've seen the evidence to support it. What are you seeing on your side of things?
We're not, I mean, we're not, but we're not, look, we are private equity backed, and we have a budget that we come up with every year, and so it's really important that we try and guess as accurately or forecast as accurately as possible. So, sorry.
You're fine.
And no, Moose.
Dogs are welcome on the show.
Are they?
Moose, it's okay, buddy.
Moose,
you're young.
No, sir. And so, honestly, recently, like volume, January is a tough month anyway, because most people take time off, and, we see it's slower. Freight rates have been slightly better than we expected, but, and we are also very, very hopeful. I would like to think that it will happen this year. I don't think where we've been is, the new normal. But I do expect rates to hopefully go up. I'm excited about, the economy and, what's to come. Certainly what's happened in California with the fires, and, so sad, even, Asheville rebuild, like there's a lot of rebuilding to be done, over the next several months, or even, people potentially moving because of, so I don't know, we do know that sometimes like these type of events can trigger, like obviously, freight sort of movement as we watch things rebuild or as we watch relief going into those areas. So it will be interesting to see, but no, I can't say like right now I'm not going to tell you, I think we're on the trajectory today. No.
Yeah.
Do I think we will be? From your mouth to God's ears, I hope so, but I'm not going to, no.
We'll see. I appreciate the apprehensiveness.
I am going to do everything we can to hit and exceed, what we have forecasted, which we think is reasonable growth. And, we will continue to try and exceed, expectations, but, nothing right now points to we're on a takeoff.
Yeah. What's the biggest thing you're working on right now for the future with respect to continuing to build and turn OTR into like the factoring company for the space?
Automation of, invoices and doing those, I listen, I think we will never lose that human contact, because for myself, the team at OTR, the veteran management team that's been there, everyone, like the people part is what's really special about OTR, the connection that we have with carriers. But, our algorithms and automation can buy better than a human looking at a piece of paper, on a screen. So certainly utilizing, tools to help us purchase invoices, and be able to do so 24/7 at any point, at any time a carrier says, I want to get paid, and I want to get them paid,
Yep.
So
speed to pleasing your customer.
That's right.
A good thing to focus on.
Carriers need money. We're going to get them paid. Brokers too. So
Yep.
it's, it's both the broker carrier and broker payments. Like, how do we make that easier for both sides? Because if you can pay the carrier, why does the broker need to re-audit it? Why, if I've already audited the paperwork, would the broker ever need, if we did our job and you can trust that we did, and most brokers should trust that OTR is, why are you spending time and money re-auditing it to send it to your customer?
Yeah.
And so this is what
I think that's,
we're trying
Go
to
ahead.
convince the
Yeah.
market, right? Like, you get it from us, like we will immediately pay our carrier, bill your customer, and that's what ePay can do. So, we're continuing to extend sort of, the evolution of what we're currently doing, and how do we do it more quickly, and how do we take some of the process out that's duplicated after we're done with it.
Yeah, I think that's going to ultimately come down to trust and your ability to convince the market that they can trust you. And I think that's done over time through execution and proving it. And I certainly think your team has proven quite a bit. Maybe there's just a little bit more. So my last question for you,
Okay.
and then I'll let you go. What advice would you give to individuals in the industry, whether they're at brokerage or factoring or tech vendors, whatever it is, who want to follow a similar career track to your own? Coming into a company when it's early beginning and rising to be the COO of the business over 12, 13 years, whatever the time frame has been.
All right. I don't know if this is advice, but this is a story of how I always thought about it. Kevin and Fritz are first cousins, or second cousins, second cousins. And I would imagine years after we started, I would imagine them, if they were out to dinner, right, and they're having like a drink and they're sitting around talking about years after all the success of these businesses, and they're like, you know what, like, let's play a game. If we had to do it all over again and you could only pick 5, who would you pick? Okay. You had to start NTG and you had to start OTR and you could only pick 5. Like, let's say you had to do that with Molo, right?
To be clear, so I'm laughing because that's not a hypothetical. Vogrich and I have literally done that.
Oh,
so
you have?
it's
Okay.
these are real conversations.
Okay.
I don't think I'm unique to that. I think these are real conversations that people who have been in our seats have had.
Okay.
So I can appreciate this.
I have actually thought, if that was ever a conversation, like, I need to know that they're saying my name. And the only way that I can know that they're saying my name is if I show up and I make a difference and I make an impact and I continue to help drive the business forward. And, I'd love to tell you every day I'm doing that, but I jokingly am like, every day I'm like, I do genuinely want to help others in the business, like, achieve what they're trying to achieve and collaborate. And, if we say we're doing this, I want to be a part of helping make sure it's going to get done. And that is using your voice. And that is 100% like being in the rooms and not being afraid to challenge, an idea. And I don't ever want to be the woman in the room that's just talking to talk. I'm not anybody's hype woman. Sometimes I'll say nothing. Sometimes I'll say a lot of things. It's just picking and choosing your moments where, it either you have an idea or you don't, or you're just challenging it, or you're, mentoring someone else, or, you're having a drink after work and you're, coming up with an idea on a napkin, which is part of our story. It's like, just be one of the 5. Try to be one of the 5. If you're trying to be one of the 5, that's probably even enough. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
So
I love that.
Thanks.
I love visualizing and creating a motivational track for yourself. Like, if they're sitting here, that my name's got to be said, and that can be such a powerful driver to just put yourself back in that visualization every day and be like, hey, if I'm going to be in that 5, I need to do this right now. I need to get this done.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
thank you so much.
Thank
You've been
you.
an incredible guest.
Yeah,
And
thank you.
I
This
feel
is
like
so fun.
I've learned a lot about factoring today. But more importantly, just learn more about you, and you're an awesome person. And I thank you very much for coming on the show.
Thank you, Andrew. This is great. Thank you for having me. I'll see you soon.
All right, everyone. That's all we got. See you next week.